welcome to this very special and exciting Newsmaker on the design and sculptor for the World War I Memorial. I believe this is the first time in the history of the National Press Club that we have had two architects and a sculptor on this stage at the same time. In any case, the National Press Club is the largest organization for professional journalists in the world. If you are interested in joining, please see us afterwards. Today's program has special significance to us at the National Press Club because we are directly across the street from the World War I Memorial. And this has been an inspiring project. Several weeks ago, when we had the commencement of the museum, it was very special to hear General Pershing's granddaughter, that is Pershing Park, say, "My grandfather feels very lonely there and needs the comradeship of his World War I compatriots." With that, let me introduce our three speakers. We have the co-chair of the World War I Commission, Edwin Fountain. He co-founded this commission in 2008. Previously, he was a partner in the Jones Day law firm for nearly a quarter of a century. He is the general counsel of the American Battle Monuments Commission, a rather responsible position. He is the grandson of two World War I veterans and is the past president of the D.C. Preservation League. Joseph Weishaar is now 25 years old. He is the designer of the National World War I Memorial and was chosen from among 350 entrants. He is a 2013 graduate of the University of Arkansas. He operates his own small business firm, Joseph Weishaar Designs. Currently, he is completing the architectural licensing program. He has won 3 prestigious prizes in architecture, including the Lyceum Traveling Fellowship to study ancient housing typologies in Pompeii. And both speakers speak very fluent Italian. He is an active oil pastel painter, an avid outdoorsman, and an Eagle Scout. Sabin Howard is the sculptor for the World War I Memorial Project. He has participated in more than 50 group and solo shows. His sculptures and drawings are shown throughout the world, and the New York Times compared his work to Donatello and Rodin. That's quite a comparison. He is the author of The Art of Life, a photo essay about figurative art through the ages. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We will have the speakers speak for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Then we will have questions and answers. I will call on you. And then we will walk in tandem together, or however, to the memorial itself and receive a tour from these two gentlemen. With that, I turn the program over to Edwin Fountain.
Thank you, Tony. When you say I've been practicing law for a quarter of a century, it makes me feel very old. When I realize that I've been practicing law as longer than Joe's been alive, that makes me feel extremely old. Couple small clarifications. I'm vice chair of the U.S. World War I Centennial Commission. It was chartered by Congress in 2013. The organization that I co-founded in 2008 was a private nonprofit called the World War I Memorial Foundation, which successfully advocated for funding for restoration of the D.C. War Memorial and the Mall, and began the conversation about the need for a national World War I memorial here in the nation's capital. And that work was taken up by the Centennial Commission, on which I'm now privileged to serve. I'll speak just a few minutes and then turn things over to Joe and Sabin, but I want to lay the groundwork for the several distinct challenges that this project poses. I've come to realize that memorial projects in Washington, D.C. are rather Tolstoyan in that they are all unique in their own way, and this one is more unique than most. The common challenge that's faced by all memorials in Washington, all war memorials that we face, is simply how do you properly and respectfully and appropriately commemorate the service of millions of our fellow citizens, and in this case 116,000 who died in a great war on behalf of their country. How do you convey the heroism and magnitude of that sacrifice? How do you do so in a way that it stands with the other memorials that we have built in the Capitol? And that's primarily a design challenge, and it's a complex one, and not just complex, but it's in thinking about the imagery and the themes and the symbolism that you put into a work of figurative art to stand as a proper war memorial. That's a daunting prospect, and we really got underway seriously on that last week, and we look forward to participating in that process. Where a World War I memorial starts to become different from other recent war memorials in Washington or elsewhere as far as that goes, is that in the first case, unlike the Vietnam or the Korea or the World War II memorials, we are not building a memorial to a generation of veterans that is still largely with us. The last American veteran of World War I, Frank Buckles, died 5 years ago. And so we are entirely building this memorial in memory, not in living tribute to a generation that has gone before. And so what implications does that have for questions as to the scale of such a memorial, its audience, its memorial themes, even the style of the memorial itself? Some people say, well, a memorial should be built in the style that would be recognizable to the veterans of that war. In other words, the design styles that prevailed in the first part of the 20th century. Others would say, no, it should be contemporary. Our view is that it should be and appear timeless, that it should speak to people today, and that it should speak to people who will see the memorial 100 years from now. The question of theme, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is very much a place of mourning, a place of grieving. It's a place where families, immediate families, parents, children, widows, siblings of soldiers who died in Vietnam, comrades of those soldiers, can come, touch the name of a particular soldier that they knew, and grieve for the loss of that soldier. World War II is very different. The time for grieving for the soldiers of World War II is largely past. World War II was a different war. It was one that we could celebrate, we could feel triumphant about. And so it is a somewhat triumphal memorial. It's a place of what I call celebratory return. And when you think about the honor flights of World War II veterans, and that's because of the Commemorative Works Act, which states that the mall is a completed work of civic art, and it precludes any further memorialization on the mall. And so knowing that, we took this site at Pershing Park, which we think is symbolically of great importance at the heart of the federal city. But because we are not on the mall, we do differ from those other memorials that have gone before. The Korea, the Vietnam, the World War II memorials only have to be memorials, and they were built largely on blank slates, on empty canvases. And so the designers of those memorials only had to conceive a memorial. In our case, this will be a memorial that is located within an urban park. And it needs to serve not just the visitors to the memorial who come to view the memorial and pay their respects to the veterans of World War I, but it also needs to serve the workers and the residents and the hotel guests and other visitors who come to Pennsylvania Avenue, to that part of town, and want an enjoyable recreational urban park. So this has to be a memorial located within a well-functioning, living, breathing park. It needs to integrate the memorial and park features in a way that is harmonious, in a way that meaningfully respects and integrates both the memorial features and the park features. And that's a particular challenge. And what we've, to some extent, done so far is we've really focused on the park design, and that's what Joe's responsible for, with, to some extent, placeholders for the memorial elements that will go in it. And we're beginning the process with Sabin of really refining and thinking about what those memorial elements will constitute, based on the general concept of the sculptural elements that you see depicted in the illustrations here. And so we think that the design does properly harmonize the two programmatic purposes of this park, the memorial program and the park program. Then there's the challenge of fitting into the site and fitting into the surrounding neighborhood. There are existing resources at this site that have to be respected. There's the existing Pershing Memorial element itself, consisting of the statue of General Pershing and then the two flanking walls. Those will be kept. Currently, they're intended to be kept in basically their present location and configuration. But that could be the subject of conversation as we go forward. But they will be kept, and they have to be retained, and again, meaningfully integrated into the ultimate overall park design. And then there's the existing park itself, the design of Pershing Park, and that raises interesting challenges, both as a park and as a memorial. And we're in an ongoing discussion with the various regulatory agencies and other stakeholders on how appropriately to incorporate existing elements of the site while achieving the congressional purpose of a proper World War I memorial. And then there's the broader contextual challenge of fitting into Pennsylvania Avenue. Pennsylvania Avenue is the most symbolically important concourse in the United States. We are one block from the White House, across the streets from the Treasury Department and the Commerce Department, across the street from the landmark Willard Hotel and the Hotel Washington. There is a great variety of civic purposes and uses around the site. There's a great variety of design styles around the site. This park has to complement and not compete with its neighbors. And at the same time, Pershing Park occupies a particular little knuckle in the city, in that it's part of the transition from the federal core, centered around the National Mall and the museums and monuments in that area, and begins the transition into the city itself, into the District of Columbia. And so it, at the same time, has to face sort of south and west, both literally and figuratively, to the monumental core of Washington, while also facing to the urban core north and east, and respect those differing and in some respects competing uses. So that's 5 or 6 very unique challenges that this project faces, and that's one reason we threw this open to an open design competition, was to maximize the field of design solutions to this. And at the end of the day, the independent jury that the commission turned this over to, decided, and the commission wholeheartedly agrees, that Joe's design best responds to that multitude of differing challenges, and does so in a way that is simple and restrained, yet elegant and powerful, that creates a marvelous opportunity to commemorate the service and sacrifice of our World War I veterans, while adding meaningfully to the memorial landscape of Washington, D.C. So that's what we faced, and that's what we're trying to accomplish going forward. And with that, I will turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Edwin. Give you guys a little bit of background, kind of where I came from getting to this process, because I'm not a licensed architect. I hadn't been to DC before the start of this competition, and I did most of this in my closet. So that kind of sets the stage for at least where I began. The whole experience of this has been a learning opportunity for me, both learning about the city of DC, but learning more importantly about World War I and really the sacrifice of our veterans in that war. I think what has allowed me to come to this point is that I came to it with clear eyes and more of a clean vision. I wasn't obstructed by all of kind of the rest of DC. I could just look at the problem. And this isn't a park that doesn't work right now. I mean, it's a thriving urban park, but it doesn't work as a memorial, and that's really what the commission needs it to be. There are great aspects of the park, and on warm, nice days, you'll see kind of people gather around the upper edges, but at the same time, kind of that sunken center of the park really just creates more of a blind spot within the city. And so I want to raise that up and give kind of that space back to the people of DC to use. It's green space, and it's their urban space, and so they should have it. Once I kind of solved that design challenge, then it was more over to the memorial elements. And there, I would say, kind of in the expression you see on the walls, we've created something that's more about time than anything else. And the expression of the memorial is really a narrative from the beginning of the war through to its end. And it's about the changing of the American people and kind of about the country as a whole as it moved from kind of that place of being a peaceful isolationist nation, really taking its step on the world stage. And I think that kind of the general gesture of the design of the memorial itself, facing eastward, is that step out. And I saw this memorial as a single unified block, rather than focusing on the individuals and commemorating all 116,000 individually. It's about them together, and because that's how we'll remember them. In the design of figures, and I could save him up here in a second to discuss his inspiration coming up with the designs, what we wanted to do was give sculptures, bring them down to the people and allow them to touch and, have that sensory experience. Because, if they can create a memory of their own, then in some way they've connected to the war. This is such, as Edwin mentioned, a war separated by time, that we don't remember those people necessarily anymore. The biggest thing that I've heard from people is, they come up to me and said, I had a grandparent or a great-grandparent who was in the war, and I remember some of their stories. And, if I could just reach out, kind of touch them again, then that would be the best thing for me. And so that's really where the inspiration came from. So that kind of coupled with giving over green space back to DC were the two biggest drivers in this design. Of course, kind of what Evan said, had to work with the urban context. I had to work with the Sherman Memorial on the west. I had to work with Freedom Plaza on the east, because this has to be a place for the everyday person. It has to be the place for somebody who wants to come and eat their lunch. But it also has to be a place for those who want the private memorial experience. And so really the further you move into the park, the more of a commemorative memorial experience becomes, until you reach that upper lawn, which is really a reflection of kind of these types of havens that you find in other battlefield memorials over in Europe. But also, we have a similar one at the base of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington. There's just a green space down there, a lawn, in which people can step away for a moment from the bustle of their lives and sort of the chaos of war around them, and have a moment of contemplative peace. I'll get Sabin up here to kind of discuss more of the artwork.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you all for coming today. Why don't I tell you a little bit about myself? It's unusual, I think, for Washington that you put a figurative sculptor in front of a podium. There are just not that many of us left. My studio's in the South Bronx, and one of the big differences that I can say is very personal to what I do. I work with real people as models. I find my models throughout the populace. And this fits hand in hand really well with this project, because World War I was about not one type of person, but it was about a unity of many different races coming together to fight and protect a nation and do something that is extremely heroic. This also goes well with how I sculpt. I'm very interested in uplifting and creating a sense of transformation when you look at my work. Okay, there's a nobility in the human race. And by using real models, that's transferred into an art form. This project is completely about that. It's about creating something that educates the public and doesn't leave anybody out. There's no snobbery in this type of work. It can be understood on many, many levels. So that was one of the things that I felt really, really important to do in the drawings, and these drawings are just conceptual states to show what we could do. This is by no means what we're going to do. This was to get to this point. So at this point, there'll be a huge transformation and a working through of this project to create something that's really formidable. I want to say something also about Joe and him picking me, because this is a really interesting combination. Joe sent me a great email in September. One of the finalists. They'd asked him to come up with a sculptor and come back to the meetings. So thank you for selecting me too. I'm very appreciative of that. And Joe said, would you please create a relief that deals with time, beginning, middle, and end. So he left me a lot of room there. And as we started to design this project, it became you can see the enormity of it and the importance of it. It's really rare that you would get a project that has so much sculpture in it. And I'm really honored to accept this challenge. And with that challenge comes a great deal of just responsibility, because what my art does, it serves. My art is about serving community, and I'm serving on many different levels here. I'm serving the country, I'm serving the D.C. area. I'm also serving the idea that I'm creating art that's at the highest level, because it represents something of such great enormity. And so I went about doing these drawings and designing these figures with certain concepts in mind. Those concepts were about how we are unified as a human race, okay? And we carry with us emotional aspects that every one of us has. They're mad, sad, glad, and scared. Those elements are shared by all of us. So what my hope is that when visitors come and see this art, there'll be a sense of connection with the art and a sense of unity. And that unity will be brought away from the memorial. And so the memorial doesn't just become something that's, oh, that's another memorial. No, this is something that will create a visceral response. And for me, this is really exciting, because how often do you see a figurative composition of 30 figures? I mean, that's pretty impressive in itself. So the opportunity here is just, it's amazing. Well, because I don't consider myself a realist. My work is really built upon how the universe and figures are designed and put together. So I'm very interested in the sense of assembling and thinking of the figure as having two elements, an architectural element and then also an energetic element that spirals through the figures. And so between the skeleton, which is the architecture of the figure, and the muscles, which are the energetic spiral movements that move through the figure, you create something that's extremely abstract. And that goes really well with what has preceded us in the last 50 years in the art world. So that just interjecting something, since I'm an artist, that's part of what I bring to this project. With that said, I'll just make it brief. Thank you so much for giving me this project, and I hope to really bring everything that I have to the table to create it. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, we will have questions. Please identify which organization you're with, and if you're here as a private individual, tell us that too. You're all welcome. And with that, we'll begin.
Thinking about World War I mean, you think about Gallipoli. You think about Christmas truces. This is the war to end all wars, and it didn't just go from isolationist to place in the world. It has now come to perpetual war.
Yes.
And has that caused any reflection on your part?
The way people support each other, and kind of the way conflict changes everybody. But this is really an interesting opportunity because it is that starting point. Read the book, The End of Innocence. And also, I mean, Hemingway's work was very helpful in this because he was an ambulance driver, briefly. But he had a lot of kind of time with soldiers before and after and saw that personal transformation that happened in all of them. This was a very brutal war, and I don't think anybody who was involved in it emerged the same afterwards. And so I think we have to play to that aspect of it. And that's why kind of on the design memorial, you go from time and the walls grow and then shrink back and recede again at the end, because it is about that transformation in time.
Well, yeah, you asked me what's the ultimate factor here? I mean, it's not a glorification of war that we're dealing with here. It's ultimately a glorification of humanity and the coming together of all these different races to form the United States. So in the compositions, there's not a single figure that's alienated. Every single figure is interconnected with the rest. They're either touching the other figures or they're looking at each other. So there's no sense of isolationism of like, aloneness. That's much more of a modern concept. So I'm going back to the idea that there's this sense of unity in the universe, the sense of order, and that's what the relief was about, that there's an order starting on the left side, and then as you progress to the right, you move into this chaos and this more of an aggressive stand, and the vegetation in the back changes in the same fashion where you go from this green and things being still alive, and then on the other side, on the right side, you go to a moonscape. But the figures don't change in the one fact that they're still connected in both sides, before and after the war.
But my question was, does this brotherhood is constrained by nationality?
No, it's not. It's not. No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Mr. Commander Delecki, formerly with Kiplinger, correct?
Yeah.
Really.
Follow-up question then. Recently there was an announcement that the U.S. Mint is going to have a commemorative coin. How much of your funds do you think you can get from that facility?
The
Everybody hear the question?
The U.S. Mint, separate legislation, but at about the same time Congress authorized this memorial, Congress also directed the United States Mint to strike a commemorative gold coin for the centennial of the war, the proceeds of which will go to the commission. The total upside of that is total possible revenues are $3.5 million, just given the size of the print run and then the price at which it'll be sold. And so from that, you have to deduct the Mint's overhead and production costs and whatnot. So I think if that coin sells out, we're looking at about $3 million, and that would come to the benefit of the commission. Again, not specifically allocated toward the memorial, but we could use those funds for that purpose.
And the $3 million would be after the overhead production cost.
That's right.
Okay, other questions? Sir?
Yeah. Please.
I'm interested to know when it comes to physical communication. You mentioned a couple times that nothing like this is being done anymore, and like you normally get the projects. I'm wondering, how does this compare to scale of it with your previous work? Is it at all intimidating for you? The type of content you can do with that kind of material?
Well, the way my career's gone, the bar is always being raised. And some of the work I've done might not have been this large in scale, but the intensity of it has always been very, very high level of focus. One of the last pieces that I did was an Apollo sculpture that took me 3.5 years, and that was 3,500 hours with life models. So what I wanted to do was to create a piece that was at the same level as what we saw historically through the Michelangelo David and going all the way back to classical era. So this project is different in the fact that I can't do it by myself. So what I will be doing is having a crew underneath me. This crew there will be 2 layers of it. There'll be 2 or 3 professionals, and then below that there'll be a series of 4 to 5 apprentices. There's a sense here of design that's really imperative. The design of this project has to answer quite a few different committees, the commission. So there's a lot more input going into this project than my own work in the studio. So, as I said before, I'm in service of. I'm here to be a conductor of what several groups would like to see happen. And I know the enormity of it, and I take it with great seriousness. Anything that I set my mind to is going to happen, and it's also going to happen at a really high level. I have a tremendous amount of integrity, and that integrity has lasted for 30 years. I'm not going to change, you know?
Other questions? Sir?
Matt Grills from Immigration Information. Although this memorial will not be on the mall, that will happen to see it in that case phone
Sure. So there is a similar kind of idea flowing through them, both in some of the material selections, but also when you look at a lot of the other memorials, they're also about time. If you look at the Vietnam Memorial, the way those walls grow and shrink is all about time and the journey through the war. Same thing with the Korean Memorial. It's about kind of that group marching through time towards their final destination. And so we're trying to capture a lot of the same ideas that those memorials had. They might not look necessarily like it, but they share ideas, and so that brings them into the same family, or brings into the memorial family in that way.
Jamie Horwitz.
I haven't specifically seen anything from that. I don't know if
It does, yes. There was a parade along Pennsylvania Avenue after the war that went by what is current site, and there are images of that.
Was there any consideration of putting attendance as effectively a way of connecting space and time?
Incorporated those images in what way?
Well, there's going to be photos.
No.
By the way, I just have one bookkeeping question. In my haste yesterday, we're going to have a tour of the site itself. C-SPAN is covering this. I forgot to ask them, C-SPAN 3, if it's going to be live. Because if it's going to be live, we can't be later than 11 o'clock. It is not covered, it's not live. It's just being videographed. Okay. And we're told them we'd meet them at 11. We can be late. Okay, let's see you and then.
Yeah, no, there were elements. 'Cause like I said, this park is still functional, and parts of it do work well, I think. Kind of the seating around the north edge, that is probably one of the best views down Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a great place to sit. And I don't want to lose that. Same thing with kind of the upper edges on the sort of the top of the berm on the south side and around the west side, where the seating is. That is the most occupied part of the site as it stands. And again, something that if people know how they want to use the place, that's going to be the best indicator of how it works going forward. And so the less I can change in my design of the existing, then the more people are going to come back, and people who used it before will still be the people who use it, compared to just a new kind of clean slate design. We don't know if it's going to be successful or not.
Okay, other questions?
So,
Sir.
earlier, Mr. Fountain had mentioned the complexities of this project, and so what I was wondering for you, designers, how much more difficult, if you could just tell us a little bit, how much more difficult it is for you to do this project with all of those complexities that were mentioned, instead of just having like a blank slate to work with? Maybe you can give us a little bit of
So I would say it's very balanced. When you have a clean slate and can do whatever you want, I would say it's very easy. But at the same time, when you have constraints, that's sometimes equally as good, because it gives you something to play off decisions. And when you have to respond to both an existing site and the way it functions and the way people are going to use it, and you have to respond to that, because now we have high traffic coming off the mall. We've got people coming over from Federal Triangle, and they have to be able to get in and out of this park, and very successfully. Whereas the mall, you can come from any direction. And so the way it's situated, the way it's designed, has to play to all those things. So in some ways, it's almost a little more fun to play with compared to having just free reign. So I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Glenn Rogers, Public Television and Press Proceeding Committee. To confirm that the goal is still to have it completed Armistice Day 2018?
That'll be the goal until Armistice Day 2018. Yeah, it's still the goal. It's an aggressive schedule. It may slip, but we have to do we have to do this right. And there are. This is not a simple matter of a client working with an artist, but there's a many-layered regulatory review and public process involved, and so there are aspects of it not really within our control, but that's still the target. To go to the gentleman's earlier question about photographs on the memorial, I just want to clarify that I know on these images these sort of look photographic, but that's really just illustrative for purposes of the submission. What you see that appears photographs there will be three-dimensional bas-relief sculpture at the end of the day.
Other,
Yeah, we're in the back time.
Is your story of World War I aimed at the artists during the 30s? Is that his mark? Capture gentlemen's artists?
At the moment, so in the initial conception of the design, it just ended at the armistice, but that's completely open to change. The way Sabin and I worked, we were, in a lot of respects, in a vacuum for part of this design process. Neither of us are historians, and so we didn't have kind of that background. But now that we're at this point and can reach out and really have a full team, then I'm sure more of those types of things will be included to the extent that they can be.
any other?
So you mentioned that.
Ma'am, excuse me.
Sorry, Brigham Away, National Press Club there.
Thank you, Rita.
You mentioned having dinner with Chris There's also the World War I Museum of Sculptor, which is on the state called Institute Park, which to me is such a great document, very peaceful and private museum. Those are covered World War I. I was wondering if you had talked about
I have not gotten the opportunity to visit that particular one, though I did meet the head curator. I did get to go to the World War I Museum in Kansas City, though, in the course of this process, and meet with the archivist there, and that was really a transformative experience in understanding the war, and really in finding things like the initial quote selection on the north and south walls, and getting to find journals of soldiers and letters home. Was really kind of a powerful generator, those things. But I'm hoping to go to
Meetings with Cultural Landscape Foundation, among other stakeholders. There is currently underway a so-called determination of eligibility for the site to determine whether or not it is eligible for listing on the National Register. The outcome of that determination is not an on-off switch in either direction, but will inform the discussion. And we expect that to be concluded within the next few months. And so we're certainly aware of those issues and sensitive to them, and are just moving forward based on what we got in front of us right now.
I wouldn't call them compromises either. This is an evolutionary design process, and kind of like I said, the way Sabin and I worked up to this point was really in a vacuum, and we didn't have input from a lot of any other institutions or groups, and so the design we came forward with is very clean, and I mean I am not necessarily I'm open to change, but it has to be with good cause.
Okay, we have a follow-up.
And one other thing I would say is that a lot of these considerations were built into the competition manual itself, and one of the criteria that the submissions were based on, and that Joe's design was selected based on, was how well they did incorporate existing aspects of the site and fit into the overall context of Pennsylvania Avenue. One of the potential aspects of significance about this site is that it fits within the Pennsylvania Avenue Development Corporation redevelopment plan for Pennsylvania Avenue, which contemplated a series of open civic spaces in a contemporary landscape design. And that's precisely what this is, an open landscape. We would submit more open than the current design that is done in a somewhat modernist landscape design while incorporating more classical sculptural elements. So it's not that we've been proceeding without regard to those issues. They have been, again, one of the criteria that we've been basing our decision-making on as we've gone forward.
Okay. I think we owe these gentlemen an applause and the audience an applause, too. I know we have more questions, but we've got to get down there. That's the only thing. Can you ask them the questions? They'll be here to answer your questions as we walk down. I think this is the first time we've ever done something like this in the history of the Press Club. Thanks to our chair, Jamie Horwitz.
What they envision for their design concept and what we'll be working with as we move forward.
Yeah, so welcome to the site. I'm Joe Weishaar, designer here. What kind of I think people saw on the boards back there is a raised area of where the fountains currently reside. So really we're stopping that upper park level where at that front edge of the fountain, the upper reaches of the site. And so really what we'll do is the upper edge of the site will just come in at grade and the lower edge of the site will come in at grade. And so that way more people will be able to access the site and without having to go up so many stairs. It'll improve the visual access of the site. Really from kind of southwest corner or southeast corner and from kind of the northwest corner. People will be able to see in easier to the site and see out as well. Hopefully once the design's completed as designed, you should be able to get a pretty good view down Pennsylvania Avenue, especially in the winter.
Where will the sculptors, how many sculptures are there?
We have two. So you have one on the wall, the relief panel, and that's the contemplative part. And the sculpture will be right around where that garage looking structure is. And then in the middle of designing, maybe change that.
I don't have a current plan to ask them to do that.
Our base and on our website at WWI on the designs on the process, on other submissions as well, and because we've maintained all the finalists and all the original submissions on the website as well, because they're tributes to the World War I veterans. We feel it's also. Finally, we invite audiences to follow us on Facebook and on Twitter so they can keep projects that we're working on, including educational opportunities.
By the way, Edward funding from Congress, correct?
I don't know authoritatively. I don't know if presidential memorials are viewed differently. War memorials and others, including the Martin Luther King Memorial, have historically been required to be funded privately.
Okay, that's very useful information.
That's to build. That's memorial costs.
Okay.
I mean, and I don't want to. I'm always reluctant to put numbers out because I don't want to be accused later of going over.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all very hard to. It's the conceptual design. We've already seen a range of cost estimates, and we really can't drill down.